The first time my own sister struck me, it was Christmas Eve. Ashley screamed, "Are you deaf or just useless?" Then her open palm cracked across my left cheek in front of 18 relatives. Fireplace. Pine garland. My mother's good china. A sound I will remember more clearly than my own wedding day. I'm Catherine Donovan, 38. I have spent 14 years of my career writing the kind of probate documents that protect families from exactly this. A forged signature, a stolen retirement account, a sister who turns the moment the money runs short. My mother said, "Apologize or leave tonight, Catherine." My father held the door open into the snow. So I walked into 10 below zero, drove the 200 miles back to Portland, and by sunrise, I was reading a forged power of attorney with my own name signed by a hand that wasn't mine. If you've ever been the family member nobody thanked, drop a comment, tell me where you're watching from, hit subscribe. What I did next is the reason my sister left a courthouse in handcuffs. My parents live in Bangor, Maine. The house on Holyoke Street. 4 small rooms and a finished basement, half a mile from Husson University. I grew up there. I have driven up from Portland for Christmas Eve dinner every December for the last 16 years. 207 miles on Interstate 95 North. 2 hours and 45 minutes on a clear day. That afternoon, there was new snow on the median near Augusta, and a state truck was salting the right lane. I drove with the radio off. The box on the passenger seat held a stainless steel coffee thermos for my father, 2 pairs of soft wool socks for my mother, and a framed black and white photograph of my grandmother Florence in her garden in 1980, which I had restored at a small shop on Congress Street. I am 40 seconds inside the house before I notice 3 things. First, the granite countertops in the kitchen are not the granite I paid for in the summer of 2023. These are darker stone, veined cream and gray, recently sealed. The $34,700 I wired to the contractor that July was for a different slab. Second, there is a small artificial Christmas tree on the side table by the front window, white lights, a paper star my mother folded 30 years ago. The real tree, 9 feet tall, stands in the living room. I have not seen the small tree before. Third, Ashley is already here. I can hear her in the kitchen. Well, honestly, Mom, you should have just told her. My sister has a voice that pitches up at the end of every other sentence, like she is asking you to agree, right? My mother came out of the kitchen, drying her hands on a striped dish towel. She wears the same chin-length silver bob she has worn for 15 years, set every Friday at Maureen's Salon on State Street. Her wedding ring is 41 years old. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "I just want everyone to have a nice night, Catherine. Tonight, please." She touched the hollow above her sternum, fingers to the collarbone, a small habit she has carried since I was 9 years old. I counted 18 people in the house, 4 children at the kid table in the den, 6 adults in the kitchen, 8 in the living room. Aunt Patty in the wingback by the window, the silver Celtic knot at her throat, her library book closed in her lap. Uncle Ray in the recliner. My cousin Brady, 24 years old, second year at Bangor Community College, folded onto a piano bench because we had run out of chairs. I sat at the far end of the table, the seat nearest the kitchen door, nearest the back stairs. The seat my mother had arranged for me, by no accident and no oversight, for 16 years. Then I heard the sentence. My mother stood at the stove with a casserole dish balanced on a folded towel and said to my cousin's wife, "Ashley handled all of it this year, Carolyn. Ashley wrapped the gifts. Ashley made the place cards. Ashley took Mom to her cardiologist in November." I have wired $1,475 to my parents' joint checking account on the 15th of every month since January of 2017. That is 108 months. That is $141,600. I co-signed the new roof in 2020. I paid the refinance fees on the second mortgage in 2022. I paid the contractor for the kitchen with the new granite I did not recognize when I walked through the door tonight. Ashley handled all of it this year. I did not correct my mother. I have a habit my grandmother passed down to me. I count things, always. 7 things were missing from that sentence. I counted them in my head. I drank a sip from my water glass, and I did not say a single word. That was the first. My cousin Brady leaned across the table during the soup course. He held a piece of warm bread in his left hand and asked me what I did for a living. He was being polite. He had not seen me in 3 Christmases. My mother answered before I did. Kate does something with the law in Portland, my mother said. Some kind of office paperwork. I forget what exactly. Some sort of legal thing. 14 years, senior associate at Sutherland and Pike, LLC, the 12th floor of the Cumberland Building in Portland, Harborview, partner track. I draft estate plans and powers of attorney for clients who have built something over 40 years and want to pass it to their children intact. I have 407 active matters on my desk. The short list for partner this year is 3 names. 2 men and me. Probate, I said quietly to Brady. I am a probate lawyer. Brady nodded. He did not know what that meant. My mother was already telling Carolyn about Ashley's eyelash studio in Brewer and how busy Ashley had been with holiday clients. That was the second. Then I saw the watch. Ashley walked into the dining room with the gravy boat balanced on a folded towel. There was a small gold pocket watch on a thin gold chain around her neck, antique, scuffed near the 7 o'clock position on the case, an inscription on the inside of the cover I knew by memory. It was Florence's watch. My grandmother gave that watch to me on the 15th of June, 2010, in room 412 at Eastern Maine Medical Center. She had taken it off her own neck and pressed it into my palm and closed my fingers around it. She said, "Keep them whole, Catherine. They don't know how." She was 82. She had 6 weeks left to live. I have kept the watch in my safe deposit box at Bangor Savings Federal on Exchange Street in Portland. I have taken it out twice in 16 years. Once on the morning of my law school graduation. Once on the morning Jim Sutherland told me I was on partner track at the firm. Both times, I put it back the same afternoon. My mother saw me see it. She did not look at me. She spoke to no one in particular, but loud enough for the table to hear. I gave that to Ashley last Tuesday. Mom would have wanted her to have something nice for the holidays. Ashley wears jewelry. Catherine doesn't. Ashley sat down on my father's right hand and rested her fingertips on the watch as she spoke. Well, honestly, Mom, this looks better on me anyway, right? Kate has more of a minimalist thing. 3 relatives laughed. My father did not look up from his plate. That was the third. At 6:28, my mother carried out the casserole. At 6:31, my father lit the 2 cedar tapers in the brass holders at the center of the table. The smell of cedar resin rose in the small dining room. Ashley said grace. She thanked God for the food, the warmth of the house, the gift of family. She thanked my mother for cooking. She thanked my father for paying for the wine. She thanked Tyler, her husband, the paramedic in the heather gray Henley, sitting 2 chairs from me on the right, for driving her up from Brewer in the snow. She thanked everyone at the table. She did not thank Catherine. 18 people in the dining room. I was the only person at that table whose name did not appear in her prayer. I knew it before she finished the second sentence, and I let her finish anyway. I drank my wine. The Italian red my father had bought from the discount shelf at Hannaford Supermarket because his employee discount cut it from $12 to $9. I drank it slowly. That was the fourth. After dinner, the adults moved to the living room, a fire of split cedar in the iron grate. The good china put away. My mother brought out the photograph albums. Ashley sat at her feet on the rug. I sat in the wingback opposite Aunt Patty. Ashley flipped to a second-grade school photograph of me. 2 front teeth missing, blue plaid jumper, in front of the upright piano at St. Joseph's Elementary in Bangor. "Oh my God, Kate, do you remember this?" she said. "You were 8. You cried in the middle of the school Christmas recital because no one was sitting in the front row. Mom had to come up and walk you off the stage." She was talking to the relatives, not to me. I was 8. The recital was 1995. My mother had the flu that week and stayed home. My father was working a double shift at Bucksport Paper Mill. Florence drove down from Brewer in a borrowed car and sat in the front row for the full 90 minutes, holding a small bouquet of grocery store carnations, and clapped for me at the end. She did not let me cry. On the drive home, she let me hold the carnations in my lap and said, "What I noticed was, Catherine, you didn't miss a single note." Ashley was 4 years old in 1995. She has no memory of that recital. She told the story anyway. In her version of it, I was the girl who cried because no one came. Aunt Patty, across the room, set her library book down on the side table. She opened her mouth as if she were going to say something, then closed it. She looked at me and shook her head once. "Not tonight," the sheikh said. "Not yet." I understood. I was on my own. That was the 5th. At 8:47, I stood up to get a glass of water from the kitchen. My wine glass was empty. The dry heat from the fire had thinned my throat. The route through the dining room was 4 steps. Ashley had pushed her chair back from the table. She was telling Uncle Ray about her studio in Brewer. I stepped behind her. My shoulder brushed her shoulder. It was the lightest contact, the kind of contact you do not feel under a wool sweater. Ashley stood up. "Are you deaf?" she said, "or just useless?" The conversation in the living room stopped. The kid table in the den stopped. The dining room with 18 people inside it went quiet. Her open palm came across my left cheek in a flat, fast arc. The sound was a hard, dry crack, louder in the small dining room with the low ceiling than a hand ought to be. The candles in the brass holders moved with the displaced air. My head turned. My right ear filled with a thin, high ringing. I did not raise my hand. I did not step back. I stood where I was. My left cheek was already warm. Aunt Patty made a small sound in her throat. No one else moved. I have been struck once in my life. It happened in my parents' dining room in Bangor, Maine at 8:47 on Christmas Eve, 2025, in front of 17 witnesses and my sister's husband. My mother walked out of the kitchen. Her hands were wet. She had been at the sink. She looked at Ashley's face, then at mine, then at the floor between us. Her fingers went to her collarbone. "Apologize," she said, "or leave tonight, Catherine." I have replayed that sentence enough times in the last 71 days that I no longer hear it in her voice. I hear it in the voice of a court clerk reading a docket. I have learned to think of her, in that moment, as a witness rather than as my mother. I looked at my father. My father was already on his feet. He had walked from the recliner to the front door in the time it took my mother to finish her sentence. He pulled the storm door open with his right hand, then the inner door. The wind came through the entry and lifted the paper star on the small artificial tree half an inch off its branch. He did not speak. He held the door. I lifted my coat from the hook in the entryway. I lifted my keys from the small ceramic bowl on the entry table. I lifted the gift box from the floor where I had set it on arrival. The thermos, the wool socks, the restored photograph of Florence in her garden. I did not put the coat on. I walked past my father into the cold. The thermometer screwed into the porch post read 10 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. The wind out of the northwest was steady at 15 miles an hour. I felt the air go into my lungs and stay there. The door closed behind me. I drove out of Holyoke Street and onto the on-ramp for Interstate 95 South. The dashboard clock read 9:22. My left cheek was still warm. The radio stayed off. I did not turn the heat above 68 degrees because I did not want the cold to leave my hands. At 10:47, I pulled off the highway in Augusta and drove the half-mile back to St. John's Catholic Church on Western Avenue. I parked in the empty lot. Midnight Mass had not yet begun. I sat with the engine running. There is a voice memo on my iPhone, transferred device to device for 16 years. 1 minute and 43 seconds. Recorded on the 15th of June, 2010 at 2:47 in the afternoon in a hospital room at Eastern Maine Medical Center. Florence Donovan, 82 years old, 6 weeks before her death. I had replayed that memo 4 times in 16 years. The morning of my law school graduation. The morning of my Maine bar admission. The morning I closed on the condo. The morning Jim Sutherland told me I was on partner track at the firm. I plugged in my earbuds. I pressed play. Florence's voice came through, smaller than I remembered, the cadence of County Cork softened by 63 years in Maine. What I noticed was, they don't know how to hold themselves together, Catherine, so you keep them whole. They don't know how. The memo ran to its end. I did not press replay. I sat until the first headlights of arriving mass turned into the lot. Then I drove south. There is a part of this story I have not told you yet. On the 22nd of January, 3 days after I filed the criminal complaint, the Internal Revenue Service placed an investigative hold on the Social Security number of Patricia Margaret Donovan, age 69, retired librarian, Augusta, Maine. Ashley had typed Aunt Patty's name and Social Security number into the witness field of the forged power of attorney. 12-point Times New Roman, on a document filed at a notary in Ellsworth. Aunt Patty's monthly Social Security check did not arrive on the 1st of February. It did not arrive on the 1st of March. It did not arrive for 11 weeks. My aunt lived alone in a one-story rental in Augusta on a fixed income of $2,140 a month, of which $1,400 was Social Security. She had $4,200 in savings. On the 5th of February, 2026, at 3:47 in the afternoon, my aunt was admitted to Maine General Hospital in Augusta with atrial fibrillation. She had felt her heart go irregular while reading a letter from the IRS at her kitchen table. She had been alone. She had driven herself to the emergency room. The triage nurse asked her if she had been under unusual stress in the last 60 days. My aunt said, "My niece's sister stole my name." She stayed one night. I drove to Augusta on the 6th. I sat in the chair beside her hospital bed. She was wearing a pale blue gown and the silver Celtic knot pendant her own mother had given her in 1970. Her right hand had a slight tremor. She said, "Catherine, dear, I think Florence is awfully proud of you for this." I held her hand and did not speak. I left the hospital at 3. I drove an hour north on Interstate 95 to Bangor. I arrived at Mount Hope Cemetery at 6:18 in the morning of the 12th of February. The thermometer in the dashboard read 9 degrees Fahrenheit. The wind out of the river was sharp enough that my eyes watered. My grandmother Florence's grave is in the older section, plot 412, under a row of bare oaks. I sat on the frozen ground. I put my earbuds in. I played the voice memo from the 15th of June, 2010, for the 6th time in 16 years. When Florence said, "Keep them whole, Catherine. They don't know how." I cried for the first time in this story. I sat at her grave for 41 minutes. When I stood up, I recorded a new memo on my phone into the drafts folder, 11 seconds long. I have not played it back. I will tell you what it says. Florence, I held them with money for 16 years. Today I let go. I am holding Aunt Patty with the law instead. That is what you didn't get to teach me, but I think you would understand. I drove back to Portland.